Okay, well, I think it's time to start. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our information session for the Berkeley Neuroscience PhD program as part of our Graduate Diversity Fair. My name is Fredrik Tunison. I'm the director of the neuroscience program, and be helped here by an outstanding staff. So, Lelenia and Peony will introduce themselves, and then our three students, panelists, will also introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lelenia Avila. I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm the graduate program manager and graduate advisor for the Berkeley Neuroscience PhD program. I'll be taking care of technical aspects of this session and keeping an eye on the Q&A, and working with me is Peony Yu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peony Yu. I'm the graduate program coordinator at Berkeley Neuroscience PhD program. I work closely with Lelenia and I help a lot with the program operations. And I will pass the mic back to Fredrik.
Okay, so now we also have three students who are joining us today, and you can recognize them because they are all wearing baseball caps, which is not something that we had organized. But Kylie, Kate, and Mars, would you please kind of briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kate. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a third year in the program in Evan Miller's lab, and I study epifluorescence and fluorescence lifetime techniques for voltage imaging in live neurons.
Hi everyone, my name is Mars. I'm a third year in the neuro program. I'm in the Weiner lab, and I am studying the role of human-specific brain structures in frontotemporal dementia, more specifically tertiary sulci, and how those might be involved in cognition, and then a variety of other neurodegenerative diseases, but mostly focusing on frontotemporal dementia. And my pronouns are he, him, his, sorry.
Hi guys, I'm Kylie. I'm a first year rotating in Fritz Sommer's lab right now. I'm really interested in theory neuroscience. I do a lot of models that involve very high dimensional vectors, and I look a lot at object representation and internal world model building. And my pronouns are she, hers.
Okay, let's see. So our program this afternoon is for me to give you kind of a brief overview of the program and about the application process. We have the chat that is turned off, but if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or actually type in your questions in the Q&A. And then at the end of my little session, we're going to open it up, and then we'll kind of have more of a discussion and try to answer any questions that you have. If we don't get to all the questions, you can make a list of questions, and we'll get back to you by email. Let's see. Maybe I can share my screen.
Yes, stop.
Great, thank you. So. Great. Great. Can everybody see my screen? Good. Okay. Great. So as I mentioned, my name is Fredrik Tunison. I'm professor of neuroscience, and I wanted to tell you something about kind of what we're doing here at Berkeley in terms of neuroscience. So I think if you're all here, it's because you're excited to learn about the brain. And if you're like us, you think that it's really one of the most exciting questions in science. The brain is probably the more complex organ that you have in your body. That's clearly, I think, a fact that's non-debatable. And people will go much further than that. It says it's a more complex object in the universe, and I think that you could discuss whether that you believe that that's true or not. We have a neuroscience program, or kind of neuroscience research on the Berkeley campus that is really quite diverse, and that covers all the different levels from cellular, molecular, to circuit systems, with applications in disease, and also cognitive science and computation. Given that, you know, we are a premier research institute, the method development, it's something that is really at, you know, at kind of the state of the art in terms of what we're doing here at Berkeley. There's an example here on this slide of all the different things that we're doing. People in, for example, in circuit systems have been using silicon neural pixels to record neural activity from hundreds, if not, you know, thousands of neurons at the same time. We have very fancy optogenetic techniques that we're using also in our research. We have a couple of fMRI machines to do human neuroscience research, including a 7T magnet that has been customized in terms of the sequences that's able to provide to do the highest resolution fMRI in the world. So that's why we call it next gen fMRI. We're using, you know, obviously all the AI and machine learning techniques in computation and neuroscience, just to give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the techniques that we're using. We also use many model systems. You know, of course, we work on humans, including, you know, developmental work in humans. That's why I have a picture of a baby here. The mouse is clearly a model system that is used extensively in many biological labs, including neuroscience labs, but we also have research in flies, in Egyptian fruit bats, in worms, and my own research in songbirds. Neuroscience at Berkeley. So neuroscience at Berkeley, as I said, is very, very diverse, and it includes the neuroscience department. So most of the faculty is in the neuroscience department, but we also have neuroscience faculty in other departments. And here's, you know, a few of the ones that have neuroscience faculty. Molecular and cell biology, vision science, and psychology are probably the three biggest departments that have neuroscience faculty. But we also have neuroscientists in integrative biology and in bioengineering. There's a total of approximately 70 faculty members and 200 PhD programs across multiple graduate programs, as I'll mention in a minute, as well as 200 students. And so, although our neuroscience department, you know, if you look at our website, you know, appears kind of small, neuroscience at Berkeley is really quite big, involving a lot of people and across many departments. Okay, so this is to give you a flavor of the different PhD programs that you could apply to where you would be doing neuroscience at Berkeley. So we are all members of this neuroscience PhD program, which covers, as it says here, all areas of neuroscience. The class size is approximately 12 students per year. But there's other neuroscience, there's other PhD programs where students are doing neuroscience research, and they all have clearly their own specialty and slightly different ways of, you know, educating you and requires, you know, slightly different requirements. So some of those programs are the molecular and cell biology PhD program, and there's probably about, you know, 4 to 5 students that are working in you know, molecular and cell biology, but with an application in neuroscience that would be part of that program. Biophysics is another PhD program that is multidisciplinary and is mostly involved in, you know, protein structure and imaging. And out of their class of also about, you know, 10 to 15 students, there might be 1 or 3 students in that group that are doing neuroscience. Psychology has also a PhD program. The students that you know, want to do neuroscience within psychology are clearly going to be doing human neuroscience. So there, you know, there's a little bit of animal work in psychology, but not very much. But a lot of human neuroscience happens in the psychology department with a focus in cognitive science, systems neuroscience, and also behavior. And then vision science has its own PhD program. They study all aspects of vision from, you know, low level, what's happening in terms of, you know, circuitry at the retina to high-level visual processing, using fMRI and computational models. And it has, a class where most of the students, even though they're studying vision, have something to do with neuroscience. Yeah, okay. So this is kind of the timeline of what you will be doing if you join our neuroscience PhD program. One of the things that is unique about our program is that you're not joining a lab, but you're joining the program. You're becoming a PhD in neuroscience student in our program. And as you see here, during your first year, you're going to be doing 3 rotations. So you can do 10-week sessions in 3 different labs. And this gives you an opportunity to check out research in different labs. And it could be, labs that have, that are studying neuroscience at different levels and using different animals. And it allows you to kind of choose where you want to do your research, right? This is an opportunity to kind of check us out and have us, further check you out and decide, in which of these labs you might be doing your research. At the end of your first year, you end up joining one of those labs, one of the labs that you rotated in, and it becomes your thesis lab. At the end of the second year, you're passing your orals, which is a qualifying exam. And once you've passed that, you're in this kind of long home stretch of 3 to 4 years where you are actually working on your thesis project. So each one of these dots here represents, a year. Before you actually start the rotations, we have this thing called the NeuroCamp, which is a pretty intensive 3-week session where we do an overview of neuroscience that focuses both on techniques, both experimental and quantitative, and where you will learn more about the research that is happening. It's also a way to help you choose the 3 rotations. Okay. So very quickly, that was an overview of our PhD program. There's more than this, of course. We have an annual retreat where not only the neuroscience department, but the whole neuroscience community gets together once a year. We have many seminar series. We have some that are run by the neuroscience department, but other that are run by other departments or by some of the technical centers that we have as well. For example, we have a weekly computational neuroscience colloquium as well. And we have journal clubs. You're going to have lab group meetings. And we have multiple ways through either classes or special sessions to build career skills. And you get to learn to teach as well. So as part of this kind of 5-year journey, for 2 semesters, you will be a GSI, which stands for a graduate student instructor. It's often referred to as a TA, teaching assistant, where you're going to help a faculty member run a course. So you do that usually in your second year and your third year for 2 separate classes. The students receive full paid tuition, a stipend, and health insurance for the entire time. So we if you're accepted into our program, we promise that you will be covered financially from the beginning to the end of your PhD. Okay. So in terms of inclusion, we are committed to have a diverse student body and faculty body as well. It's something that is clearly a work in process, particularly in terms of the faculty, in terms of getting faculty that is really quite diverse. But we are extremely committed at UC Berkeley to achieve that and to increase the kind of diversity that we have at all levels. It says here that our training environment is inclusive, and that we strive to have a supportive scientific community, and that we believe that having diverse scientists makes better science, and that all science can advance discovery and help improve society. There's really a focus, as it says here on the bottom, to train both our students. I think that's kind of obvious, but also our mentors. So faculty have multiple training programs where they're trained to become better mentors. And this happens by having, workshops where we get people from outside the university to come and give us advice on how to become better mentors. And then our students themselves get training in terms of, being good graduate student instructors and participate in other kind of programs. So here's a list of equity programs that we have. So the neuroscience department has an equity committee that is a faculty committee with graduate students representatives. The graduate students themselves have a graduate advisory committee. Molecular and cell biology have a committee that's called Inclusive MCB. At the university level, we have an office for graduate diversity. And as it says here, we train, and I mentioned before, we train both the mentors as well, our students. In terms of demographics, you can see that about 34% of our students are from underrepresented backgrounds, and about 15% are international. And on the map here, you can see where our students come from in the United States, and the arrows pointing towards the west and the east are international, and the north and the south are international students as well. Okay. Right. So I think kind of a big part of having, a supportive scientific community is social events. And this is something that we work hard to have. We have something that we call NeuroFriends, where we encourage the graduate students to go on social events, either once a week for the first years or once a month from years 2 on. We have what's called Bear Social Hours, where approximately once a month, the whole community gets together. We have student-student mentoring. We have rotation to graduation advising. And with all of this, with all these bonds that we try to form both between students and between students and faculty, we believe that we are very successful. Most of our students are very happy, and we have a quite good PhD completion rate here, as it says, of about 92%. We are successful. These are just some statistics in terms of the publications. So if you look at the papers that were published in the last 5 years by our students, we find that the numbers is very high. 238 papers were published.
90% of graduate enter research-related careers. Okay.
Sorry. I don't know if somebody had a question. Okay, I'm almost done. So, right, you can see the fellowship success is quite high. Is almost 50% of our students have won fellowships. And you can see that in terms of the career trajectories, most of our graduates enter research-related careers. They're either, in academia as professors or as postdocs, or they're doing research in industry. Some are in startup companies as well. And we provide career advising and resources. I think throughout the years, and this is something that we are working to make even better in our program. Okay. So application tips. I'll finish for this. So the two essays that you write are going to be very important. So the statement of purpose that really explains why you want to come to graduate school, why you want to be a neuroscientist, why Berkeley might be a good place for this next adventure, and also tells us, about your past research and also how you see your future. You don't have to necessarily choose, a specific professor that you're going to be working on. But of course, it's very helpful if you can make a list of, between, I would say, a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 10 of labs that you find interesting, to show that, yeah, this is indeed a good match for you in terms of coming to Berkeley to do science. The next essay you're going to write is your personal statement, and in this essay, we want you to tell us about your background, the challenges that you faced, both in science and in life. That's the kind of the broader context. This personal statement shows kind of your maturity, your views about diversity. It also, somebody who's gone through hardships has something different to bring to the community that somebody that, has had an easy path to science. And so these are things that we take into account, take into consideration during the application. Oh, faculty interest, it says 4 to 6. I just mentioned 3 to 10, but you can see the range basically of faculty who you think you might want to do research with. As it says here, many different talents drive outstanding science, and we are looking for a very broad class. I think it's one of the unique things about studying the brain is that you can study it, using so many different approaches that require so many different skills that there's just no way that, it's a one size fit all, right? There's no perfect candidate. The perfect candidate is in some ways the diverse candidate in terms of, the technical skills that they have, the things that they're interested in, the kind of quantitative background that they have, and so forth. We're going to remind you this again, but the application deadline this year is December 2nd by 8:59 p.m. Pacific time. It's, close to midnight Eastern time. This is something that you need to take very seriously because it's very difficult, and you should read that as impossible to make exceptions if you miss the deadline. There are fee waivers. There's a way that you can have the application fee waived. And if you have any more questions, if you have any questions about, how to get a fee waiver, you should contact Lelenia or Peony, and they will help you out with that. And with that, I am done and ready to pass it along. Again, my name is Frederick Tunison. I'm professor in neuroscience and director of the neuroscience PhD program. And here's my email. And you can feel free to also reach out to me if you have any questions. Okay, so I'll stop sharing. And so I think at this stage we like to turn it to our current students, and they're going to share with us why they applied and ultimately decided to join Berkeley Neuroscience, and perhaps something you wish you knew about the program or application process when you were applying to the program. So we'll start with Kate, followed by Mars, and then Kylie.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. Just in case you came in a little bit late, I'm Kate. Nice to meet you. So in terms of why I applied to Berkeley Neuroscience, part of it was I wanted to be on the West Coast. So I applied to a bunch of schools on the West Coast. And then sort of once I got here, one thing that really, really stuck with me, which I'm sure you'll hear sort of mimicked by either my fellow panelists now or certainly people throughout the admissions process, is that the people here are really incredible. I knew that coming in, I wanted to do cellular molecular neuroscience research. I'm much more of a sort of technical neuroscientist. And I knew that I would be able to find faculty who I really appreciated and who sort of enjoyed their research. But one of the things that I really liked about Berkeley, both during the application process as well as during the interview process and sort of being here, was that I found that the faculty and also the students really align with me in terms of sort of kind of how we think about research, how to approach research, the kinds of things that are important in science, like Frederick was highlighting in terms of diversity of perspectives, diversity of people in the program was something that was really important to me coming in. And that's certainly something that I found at Berkeley. And so I think kind of the people here and the perspectives that they bring and the way that we all really do like support each other and like welcome those perspectives and welcome people's experiences. As students, I can probably speak less to the faculty side, but certainly as students, and I've felt it from faculty as well, I think was something that really sort of sealed the deal for me in terms of feeling like Berkeley was someplace that I could really thrive in grad school. In terms of something that I like kind of wish I knew, it's sort of that people here are very willing to talk to you. I feel like most, if not all, of the grad students are very willing to like answer emails, hop on a Zoom chat. And so one of the things that I really wish I did during the application process was to reach out to more students, reach out to professors. I think I saw someone in the Q&A ask like, oh, can we reach out to professors? Yes, that can be very helpful. It can help you make connections. It can also help you make your decision on if you feel like Berkeley is kind of the right place for you and the way that you think about science and the way you approach things. So that's kind of something that I really wish I knew going in, was that you can be sort of more forward about that. And I think that it would have maybe helped me come to that conclusion a little bit easier. It's certainly something that I felt during the interviews and my in-person visit. Yeah, I'll turn it over to Mars next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mars. For those of you that may have came in late, yeah, that's my name. Kate said, honestly, like everything that I was going to say, to be honest. So I kind of like at the, don't want to sound like a broken record at this point, but yeah, to echo a lot of her points. I think the thing that really sold me to Berkeley was not just the great research being done, but a lot of it had to do with the faculty student body, just like the general environment. I come from Seattle, so not too far, still on the West Coast. So a lot of like the whole nature environment component was important to me, but not like, I guess it wasn't like a huge priority. So I applied to a bunch of different schools, just across the country and across the globe. But I feel like during my interviews and during like the actual visits, it felt a lot more just, I don't know, inclusive and very like close-knit, but not in the sense that like it was like non-inclusive, but instead just it seemed like there was a really deep connection among all the students and the faculty, and they were really here to just kind of like welcome you with open arms and try to really like determine what it is that brings you here, what are your interests, how we can really support you, and how we can like, you know, really uplift people from a lot of different backgrounds. And me in particular, like I come from a very like low income, unconventional, non-traditional background. So it was really, really encouraging to be surrounded by people who find value in that diversity, not just in who you are, but like kind of what your interests are, like what your perspective might bring to the table. I felt like it's not something that is often valued as much as it should be, especially when it comes to really like, I don't know, top tier institutions and like some programs and things like that. So it helped me really feel at ease, and something that I still feel like I'm kind of working through, just because there's like, you know, bureaucratic sort of like things that I feel like kind of were ingrained as an undergrad. But here it feels really at ease, where I don't necessarily feel so distant from like my colleagues and like my peers and the faculty. Like it feels very like, you know, we see eye to eye and like a leveled playing field, which is just really nice and like really comforting, because I don't necessarily struggle to ask questions or ask for help. It's a very supportive and inclusive environment. And on top of that, the people here are just so friendly and so nice. Everyone is really determined to try to like help you in any way that they can. And it's not so much a matter of like the resources at your disposal. It's more so like, I don't know, like they're always there, you know, and it's kind of just a matter of like you reaching out and trying to just find access to those resources, and they're in abundance here. Like everyone is here to really help you. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Kate said it so well. So I just Yeah, it's really great. The research here is awesome, but I feel like what really made it for me was the people and the community and the values that they share. They were very aligned with my own values and perspectives, and it's really great. So one thing that I feel like I wish I guess I had known, maybe like the cost of groceries, if I'm being honest. Like it's quite expensive. I feel like the cost of living is relatively like relative to where I was coming from, Seattle, like it's pretty even, but the cost of groceries and food was not something that I was like kind of aware of. So that's just something to keep in mind, I suppose. Like if you maybe come from like a more um maybe not like I guess yeah, it just the cost of groceries are pretty expensive. So I've been meal prepping and that helps me just with like budgeting and finances and everything. So just I guess something to consider, but you know, it's not a huge deal. The stipend that they provide is definitely enough to live comfortably and within your means. So it's great. Everything about the program is cool. But yeah, that pretty much sums up everything. And then I'll pass it to Kylie.
Dang, well, going third, you guys both really got me because you didn't leave much for me to say. But I will say, so I was really interested specifically in doing theory. And I was also interested, I was doing a lot of neuromorphic computing research before, so like bio-inspired hardware design for supporting different types of AI, like kind of weird AI. And so I had a pretty specific idea of what I wanted to do, and I was really looking for an institution that had a strong theory program, which Berkeley absolutely does. But then also, you know, a good engineering school and good math and physics. And I mean, yeah, can't ask for better than here, right? So that was really awesome for me. I would say, you know, like I had a pretty specific idea of professors also who I wanted to work with because, you know, theory is pretty small at all institutions, and that's true here as well. So I would say if you are pretty set on working with, you know, one or two professors, definitely talk to them and make sure that they're accepting students in their labs because, you know, depending on funding, people just might not have space. And if that would be, you know, an impact on your decision, you should definitely reach out in advance and just, you know, talk about peer availability. Um, that said, I definitely would not recommend picking a place, regardless of where you go, but picking a place for one specific person, because as you'll find out, you know, things change logistically. It's really hard for professors to know what their funding situation is going to be like year to year. Unexpected things happen. And you know, even mentoring style, you might rotate with somebody whose research you're really interested in and just find that, you know, your styles don't mesh and you'd be better off picking somebody else. A lot of the advice that I got when I was picking grad school was that, you know, your match with your mentor personally is more important than the research match. And I think that really is true. I think it's important to find somebody who you're comfortable with and who can give you advice on more than just specific research, stuff like grant writing, paper writing, you know, how to do academia. So I would say definitely have an open mind and don't just be like dead set on a specific person or people. Um, and then yeah, just in terms of like general life stuff other than research, I grew up in California and I'm huge into a lot of the outdoor sports here. So most of the places I was looking at were either going to keep me here in the north, kind of Northern California area, or take me to Chicago, which I also do love, but is obviously very different climate wise, you know, a little harder to do mountain biking without mountains. But yeah, I mean, in terms of outdoor activities, Berkeley, we're so spoiled here. We're like 3 hours to Tahoe, one or two to the beach, depending on which beach you want to go to. Amazing hiking. We have this big wilderness area, literally starting right behind the university. Um, yeah, and then other resources, we have the National Labs, which is right up the hill. So I would say just like geographically, you know, you've struck gold. We're right across from San Francisco too. Um, One thing that I wish I'd known while I was applying, um, you know, I suppose it would be more of the same thing that I said earlier about the professors, you know, reaching out in advance. Because one of the people who I was really set on working with was like, when I got here and showed up, they were like, oh, actually, you know, I probably will not have funding to take on a student your year. And, you know, that's totally fine. It didn't change my decision, but it was definitely a big surprise to me. And it made me think a lot harder than I had to when I was getting ready to commit. So that would be my big advice. And then just to echo what Kate and Mars said, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to people. People here are extremely friendly and welcoming, and they will give you good advice. Like, they're not going to just try and sell Berkeley to you. They're going to really give you good advice on, like, given your situation, what they think would be a good choice for you. And if that's not Berkeley, then they'll be honest with you. You know, I really had a great experience when I was applying, talking to different people really candidly about, like, you know, this is what I'm interested in and these are my concerns. And that was super helpful for me.
Thank you, guys. That was very useful. And I'm going to kind of follow up on some of the things that you guys have said. So we're getting to the period where we're going to, you know, try to address your questions. There's already a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A. So we'll maybe go through those first, and then, you know, we could also, you know, please, you know, raise your hand and turn on your camera if you want, and we can also do this as a more of a conversation. So kind of a follow up, and there's a few questions in terms of can we have a list of the faculty who take on students? The reason that this is difficult is that, you know, you're applying now. You rotate the first year, and, you know, you join a lab like almost 3 years from now, right? And that's so far ahead in the future that it's hard for faculty to know exactly whether they'll be taking students during that time. But what Kylie said is very true, is you should actually reach out to faculty just to get a feel for, like, you know, how many students they plan on taking the next years, kind of what they're working on, you know, would they be interested in somebody that has your background, and, you know, having, you know, starting that conversation, and it will help you out actually, you know, in terms of writing these essays that you're going to be doing in your application. So I think it's something that I will, you know, basically kind of rewording what Kelly said, but you know, kind of highly recommend that that you do this. Let's see. There's a few questions in terms of you know, our admit rates and so forth. So let me just give you kind of broad stats on this. There's usually approximately 400 applications. We usually interview, you know, somewhere between 40 and 50 students out of those 400. And out of those, we accept somewhere between, you know, 20 and 30. And out of those, we have somewhere between 10 and 15 that come. So that's kind of what happens in this process, just to give you ballpark numbers. In terms of how many, you know, international students we accept, you know, out of those, you know, these are really coarse numbers, and of course it depends on who is applying, and, you know, the fit with the programs and the faculty and so forth. But in terms of international students, and Lelenia and Peony, correct me if this is not quite exact, but, you know, it's about 10%, right? So out of those 40 that are interviewed, it's going to be somewhere between, you know, 4 and you know, and 6 or something like that. And in terms of the class, you know, it's about half that, you know, about 2 that would be admitted to the program. Does that seem about right?
So for a class size of 10 to 12, we usually have a couple of students. So that's kind of
Right.
up closer towards like 20% of our
20%,
class. Yeah.
right, yeah.
But still, it's 2 out of like the 10 to 12 that we have.
Right. So, okay. So I think I've, I mean, you know, anybody else who among us, that means the Berkeley folks, you know, you can look at the Q&A, and you can, you know, feel free to kind of, you know, answer any of these. Oh, there's a few questions in terms of how you calculate, Lelenia, this one is for you, the upper division GPA, I think there was one,
just for GPA calculations, like in general, you can search for like GPA calculators, like UC Berkeley GPA calculators, and you usually do a Google search and you can find some calculators online that can help with that. So when you're using your kind of your upper division or your upper level, so everything after your first 2 years, you can do it that way. And then as far as your major, it's any classes that are pertaining to your major that you would calculate for the exam, for the application. And those additional GPAs are really for on a 4.0 scale. If your institution does not use a 4.0 scale, please do not convert to a 4.0 scale. Instead, there is a question after those initial set of questions on the application that has an alternate GPA. And so put in, and for some people that's a number, for some people that's a letter, for some people that's a phrase. It really depends on your institution and what their kind of cumulative kind of grading is based on.
Well,
Maybe
oh, sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead, Kylie.
I was going to say, I see one question in the Q&A. Is there a neurotech program, CS, artificial intelligence / machine learning and neuroscience? Do I apply to the neuro program or CS program for this? So I actually went through the same process when I was applying, because like I mentioned, I was coming from actually a computer architecture background. So I was considering both. And I think, no, I only ended up applying to neuroscience programs, but when I was picking programs, I was really intentionally looking at programs that kind of allow you to blur these lines. I think at most institutions that's true. You know, when you get to the graduate level, you have a much greater degree of control of like how you want to, pick your emphasis. But there are some rules in terms of advising, like who can be your primary advisor. And I would say when it comes down to actually picking which program you apply through, you should really think through what types of questions you're hoping to ask in grad school and what you actually want to work on in terms of your day-to-day research. So for me, I'm post-graduation, I think I will go back into the same space of kind of taking these biological design principles and using them more in an artificial space, which would be more, the CS side of things. But for grad school, me personally, I was really interested in working much more on the theory, the math, the modeling side, and doing less of the engineering process. So I would say it's a really personal choice, but just think about what you want to be working on day to day and like the biggest questions you want to ask, like where do those fall? For me, day to day, the engineering cycle is quite long. And so, I'm interested in still kind of working in that space, but I want my day to day to be more theory neuroscience. So that's why I picked neuro. But I would say Berkeley, excuse me, is a great place to do neuroscience if you're interested in getting into this kind of weird blend of things. We have the Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience here, which does a lot of that, and an excellent EECS program. But yeah, I would say, it's going to be personal. Try applying to both, right? And then talking to professors and see what really clicks with you.
Thank you, Kylie. Lynette, before we get to you, I would like either Kate or Mars to answer the question about what are your research work times? Would I be able to do a PhD with a primary parent responsibilities?
I'm not a parent, but I do have chronic illness, and so I have something that takes me away from research. So I'll speak to it from that perspective. I think it partially depends on the faculty, in all honesty. But I have found, I don't know that I could have earnestly completed a PhD program to the degree that I have if I were not here and if I were not working in the lab that I'm working in. So over just for like vague context for like time commitments, I've been kind of like not able to work 100% essentially for the past like year and a half. So this is over when I was doing my qual stuff, and it was also kind of picking up into my third year now, starting doing my thesis research. And it like started basically at the end of rotation. So when I was choosing in a lab, it was something that I was considering. And it was something that I was fairly upfront about with people, with faculty, in talking with them, and in considering a lab. I have found ways to make it work. It is not tremendously easy because you are trying to do multiple things at once. But that being said, I do think that there are ways to make it work. I am still doing research. I have found myself to be fairly, I mean, imposter syndrome aside, fairly successful in my time here. So I think that it is possible. I don't know if we have any parents currently in the program. Someone else might be able to answer that better than I am. I do know that we have, there is like housing specifically available for graduate students with children or with families or dependents. You can find more info about that, I believe, on the housing website in University Village. So there are resources specifically for parents that you can likely seek out either with GradDiv or maybe with the neuroscience program specifically if Lelania or Frederick or PNEU, either of you guys know anything about it, but that's kind of what I know about it from my semi-adjacent perspective.
Great. Lynette, why don't you, once you've been raising your hand for a while and you're also in the Q&A, so go ahead.
Yeah, my question is twofold actually. One is the mathematical classes you need prior to applying, and second fold would be, do you need a specific degree prior to applying in biology, or can it be based off health admin / pre-nursing?
Right. So there's no requirements in terms of specific degrees or classes. And so in our review, we take, this kind of holistic approach. And, one of the things we do take into account is your academic preparation. And so if you're going to be a neuroscientist and you have not done a biology degree or, biologically related kind of degree, but have done, for example, research in neuroscience, right? Or even in, it could be even, clinical science that has a neural component to it, that would replace a lack of, training in neuroscience, right? So, but you cannot have nothing. If you have really no research in neuroscience and you don't come from a biological background, that becomes quite complicated. Yeah.
I have McNair, and I did social cognition for neurocognition for schizophrenia and related to developmental children and developing their ability to have that social cognitive perspective when they grow as a straightforward lesson plan.
That's plenty.
That's what I'm getting published on.
Yeah.
That's plenty. Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see, any other live questions, or otherwise we can, some of these we're not going to be able to get because I see we only have 10 more minutes all these questions, but we'll definitely answer them, offline actually, how does that work, Lelania? I'm saying this, but now because these are some anonymous participants, so.
Yeah. So, if we don't get your question, please email us. We'll be putting our email in the chat, as well as a link to our neuroscience application information. We do still have 9 minutes left, so I want to, we can go through and start addressing more questions from the Q&A, but please also raise your hand if you have a question, so that we can address it there. We have a question about, I think sometimes it's really hard for us to give really exact percentages on things, but people are kind of interested about the non-neuroscience undergraduate degrees. I think we just addressed that in your response to just now, Frederick. Let's see here. So someone asked, because of the structure of your program with lab rotation, should we still include the faculty we want to work with in our written statement?
Yes, please do. I think or an area, right? But I think you should, I think you should do your homework basically and see, is this the right program for me to apply? Will I be able to find a home? And with, the caveats is what Kylie said, is that, you might have a plan saying, oh, these 3 labs are actually perfect for me. And it turns out when you come here, you found out it was lab number 5 or number 6 that was actually a better match. but I think that's totally, I mean, that's totally fine. But I think doing that exercise of, you know, projecting you into the future and seeing, oh, this is really the kind of question that I'm interested in. Can I find a lab that does that? A second lab that might be do something else that I'm also kind of interested. And then, you know, building that into your essays is important. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question says, do undocumented students still receive guaranteed funding? For those without work authorization, for example, without DACA, how would we complete the teaching requirement if we're not allowed to be employed by the university? So this is kind of a new situation that we're dealing with given the recent rulings on this. Students that are not able to be employed are supported by other means. So students coming in will usually get a living stipend that's not tied to employment. And the employment aspect for the teaching requirement is something that we are going to have to navigate with the graduate division on how to do that. The teaching requirement is something that we have for our program, but it's also a kind of a professional development opportunity. So it's not a bridge that we cross, but something we would work out for students coming into the program in that situation.
There are a couple of questions here I see on which neuroscience grad program to apply to. And those, it's not always easy to answer that, but Hey Yin Esther here ask if your interested field is neurolinguistics and second language acquisition, which program, neuroscience or linguistics PhD program will align more to that interest? I would say either our neuroscience PhD program or actually psychology, because psychology has more work in neurolinguistics than our linguistics department. And Lalenia, maybe you can talk about this as well. Because another prospective student here is asking about MCB versus neuro for doing kind of molecular work, and we do have a way where, correct me if I'm wrong, Lalenia, but you're not allowed to apply to 2 PhD programs at Berkeley.
That is
You
correct.
only
You
apply-
must only apply
right.
to one. Yeah.
You only apply to one, but what you can do in our applications is to check a little box that says, you know, if you're not selected, would you be willing to have your application forwarded to another PhD group, right? PhD program. And we do this both with psychology and with MCB. And so this is a way where if you have research that is really between the two, I think you need to choose which one would be better. And this is, again, something that you can come up with that answer by having a conversation both with us as well as with the faculty in those areas, right? Because you're going to see that some faculty are both in psychology and in the neuroscience PhD program. And then you want to decide, okay, which of the PhD programs do I apply to? One of these two might be better for you because you like better the rotation system. You know, in psychology is direct admits, so there's no rotation. You might like better the class that are required and so forth. So you should think about what is best for you, but you could also email the faculty and start a conversation about, oh, I see that you're both in the let's say psychology and in the neuroscience department. I'm thinking about applying to graduate school. Do you have any recommendation for which programs I should apply to, given that this is my interest and so forth? And that would help you make that decision.
Something that I might add to that too, if you do have specific faculty you're interested in, especially for neuroscience, which is pretty interdepartmental, sometimes if the faculty is in a different, home department, they have like obligations to accept students from that department. And so if you're coming in through neuro and you want to be in the lab of somebody who's not in the neuro program, you could reach out and be like, just ask, as when you're asking about availability, do you have requirements that students be from a specific program? Or and a lot of times that's for funding reasons, but it's worth asking.
Someone asked, do our stipends increase each year? Yes, they do. And we do have a wait list. We do enable a wait list for our admissions.
Cool. We got 2 questions down.
2 questions, perfect. Let's see here. What percentage of graduate students complete their degree, and how does this program prepare students for the workforce after they obtain their degree?
Yeah, I think I had those statistics. I think it's 97% or 90, yeah, something like that, right? I think that, 97% of our students basically complete their PhD. So most of our students do. And about 92%, enter research related areas. In terms of preparation, the careers that you can get with a PhD is something that is rapidly changing. And so, I can say that, we try to have more and more of like career orientation workshops and kind of trainings. But this is still a work in progress, but that's, we're very much, very well aware that this is happening. Yeah, the last 3 PhD students in my lab all went to industry. One of them in OpenAI, another one for Intel, and the other one for Google. And that's, partly because we're like in the Bay Area, and this IT sector is really needing, really interested in getting highly trained, students that can think critically and that had thought about complex systems, which is, something that the brain is. So, and so this is happening clearly more and more. So, yeah.
With the 1 minute we have left, I just wanted to ask this last question. Does the neuroscience PhD program allow for interdisciplinary research collaboration with faculty in other Berkeley departments, like environmental science, policy, and management? I'm interested in drawing from disparate fields to inform conceptual models, so I'm wondering if this could be accommodated.
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the great things about Berkeley, is that we're super interdisciplinary. I mean, if you just look at the number of faculty in the graduate program, as you saw, it's a high number, maybe larger than you thought by just looking at the neuroscience department. So make sure that you investigate that. If you want to go beyond those 70 faculty members, you will need to have a sponsor that is in the neuroscience PhD program, so one of these 72 faculty, and set up this kind of collaborative research with somebody who might not be in the neuroscience PhD program. But this is clearly something that is possible. Yeah, and that is happening more and more. So absolutely.
And we're at time.
Okay, good. So I think I need to thank everybody for joining, and I hope we were able to address most of your questions, and the ones that we were not able to address, we please email us. Feel free to email me or Lelenia or Peony, and actually, I mean, even the grad students, if you have specific students to the graduate students, I don't think we've shared your emails, but if you're okay with it, we can also forward some questions to you guys. Great.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Don't forget that the application is due December 2nd, 8:59 p.m. Pacific time, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. We have a lot of information on our website. Peony posted the link, and please reach out with your questions. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.